So for this workshop, I was thinking about how to start, and I decided to create 4 personas who I think represent those who are involved or contribute to the Euclid reporting functionality. If you are a current user of the reporting functionality, you should hopefully fit into one of these personas. If you will join the reporting functionality at some point, you hopefully will fit into one of these personas going forward. Of course, this is from the ECHA vantage point. This is how we see you. It'd be interesting to know if you don't think you fit into one of these personas or if you think you're a bit different. But I'll explain a few words about these personas because we'll be referring to them as the presentation goes on. So for the first persona, report builders or authors, these are people who are writing report templates, free marker report templates, in order to upload them into Euclid and so that they can be generated by users. At the moment, probably ECHA and EFSA are the heaviest report builders, but indeed any Euclid user can be a report builder. The second persona is the reporting product management. This resides in ECHA, as ECHA are the owner of Euclid, and the reporting functionality resides within Euclid. So this is the team that are making sure that your requests are being acknowledged, that we're acting on your feedback. If you notice any bugs, we're trying to fix them. The third persona is the software developer. He won't appear too much in the following presentations, but he's important because he represents, for instance, a contractor working on the reporting functionality in Euclid. And if there's something that needs to be done in what we call the back end of Euclid, he'll be involved or she will be involved. For instance, if we want to extend the reporting functionality to a docx output as well as an RTF output, the software developer will be involved to enable that functionality. Or for instance, if we wish to start expanding the reporting to generate from articles, as we did recently with Euclid, he will be involved to make sure that we can indeed generate reports from articles. And the fourth persona, and this is the most populous persona, this is where you'll probably find yourself, it's report generators. These are the people generating reports, typically that come by default with Euclid. So report generators are making use of what the report builders have made for them. So with these personas in mind, let's first of all go to something very familiar, hopefully, to a lot of you if you're generating reports. So in Euclid, there comes a number of default reports. These can be split into 3 categories of types of reports. The first is reports that directly support a regulatory obligation. So a classic example of this is the chemical safety report for REACH, Article 14, which is an extensive report summarizing the hazard use, manufacturing information of a chemical. Another one is, for instance, the list of confidentiality claims that's used within PPP and BPR in the EU to support the confidentiality claims process. The second category is a bunch of reports that support regulatory submission and processes. These aren't necessarily created because of a regulatory obligation. They have been created because an authority, for instance, like ECHA, have decided that a report will support the users who are submitting information to ECHA for these directives and regulations. So, for instance, we have a poison center notification report, which is under CLP, and this summarizes hazardous mixtures. We have a skip notification report that summarizes articles containing substances of very high concern. And the third type of report are a number of reports that don't necessarily directly support a regulatory obligation. They haven't been decided at an authority level to be created to support a directive or regulation. These are reports whereby we've got feedback from stakeholders that this would be useful for whatever reason, and we've gone ahead and created the report. And these are reports like the list of attachments, the INBAD references, the GHS classification and labeling report, for example. On the Euclid website, we have made descriptions of the use of all these reports if you go to this web address at the bottom there. So you can find out more about the intended purposes and uses of these reports. So there's a lot of reports that come with Euclid, a lot of default reports, and that is because we're making use of the technology that was available with Euclid 6. And it's good to do a bit of a comparison here to show what's available. So with Euclid 5, which was running roughly between 2007 to 2015, there was one report that came with this Euclid. That was the CSR report, and it was actually called the CSR tool. As you see, sitting on the Euclid 5 there is the man in the hat. That's a software developer. This report was built by a professional software developer, made available in a Euclid package and delivered for everyone who is wanting the CSR report to generate. There's a cutout picture of the report generators because obviously we were only reaching those report generators who wanted to generate the CSR report. Now, by very big contrast, in Euclid 6, things have changed a lot. The reporting functionality in Euclid is probably the most customizable part of Euclid, in the sense that any Euclid user can build a report, can manage that report on a local instance, and can make that report available for other users to generate without us, for instance, in ECHA or EFSA, even knowing about it. This can be managed outside of Euclid releases. This can be managed purely by an organization. And we in ECHA and EFSA more recently have been making big use of this flexibility. So we've been writing lots of reports. Currently, there are 53 reports available by default in Euclid 6 as of this year. And we have a number of different report generators. Another important improvement with Euclid 6 was that we increased the output types available. So not only was RTF available, but PDF, HTML, XML, CSV, for instance. So coming back to our personas, hopefully you've found a persona that fits you a little bit, hopefully. But the two main personas indeed are the report builders and the report generators. These are the people, if you find yourself in a persona, it'll probably be one of these. So the report builders, typically they have in mind the programming. They're thinking about the challenges they face to produce a report. And the report generators are looking at the nested structure of Euclid, which can be quite complex, especially for mixture-based entities. And they're thinking, how do they get information out, for instance, in a standalone report, so they can make use of it later? And that's how at least we perceive these two personas. But again, it'd be interesting to know if you have different thoughts on that. So the report generators have a need-led approach. They want data from Euclid, they want data extracted into a certain file type so that they can use it for a certain reason. So as mentioned, for instance, they want a report like the CSR to directly comply with a regulatory obligation. But they're also using reports to visualize data in a different way, for example, in a more compact CSV view. They're using reports to quality check or review data. For instance, before submission is a classic quality check use of the reporting. They're using reports as part of an internal record keeping or potentially even for publication. This is normally from an authority point of view. But they're also reporting issues with the default reports via the help desks. So for instance, if you find a bug in a current report, and you're also requesting improvements or new reports to be built by ECHA or EFSA. And for instance, we use the Euclid Open Backlog as one source to fetch or to get these improvement requests. So at least from ECHA's perspective, that's what's going through your mind. And again, it'd be interesting to see if you have any other reasons or need-led approaches. The report builders are different. They don't have a need-led approach. They have an activity-led approach. They are writing report templates. They are actively doing something to curate a report so it can be generated. They're potentially contributing to the reusable set of common modules we have using GitHub. They're discussing with other report builders to see what solutions are available for certain challenges. For instance, they're using the OECD customization forum for this. They're managing their uploaded reports for themselves or other users as well in the local instances of Euclid. And they're testing the reports they're building. For instance, they may be taking advantage of the bash script made available on the Euclid website to batch generate reports to test to see if they're solid or not, robust enough or not, which again is available. This script is available from GitHub, and my colleague Thomas will elaborate a little bit on this a bit later. So from a reporting management point of view, when it comes to knowing how many users are there or why, we're a little bit in the dark. From the report builder's point of view, we typically only get to hear from report builders when you want to start building a new report and you want some level of kickoff, or you get into trouble or difficulty in building a report. For the report generators, even here we have some opaque points. So for instance, many of the default reports can be put to reasons other than which they were created for, and we're not aware of these varying purposes. But this doesn't really matter per se. We don't need to know all the uses of the reporting functionality. But indeed, that's why this workshop is so important for us, actually, because we can get a chance to hear more from your wish list for reports and about your usage of the current report generator. So to sum up for this part of the presentation, we have a number of outlets to support the use of Euclid's reporting capability. We have the ECHA help desk to support for general reporting questions and ECHA-specific reports. The EFSA help desk support those reports which have been created by EFSA and which are PPP-specific. We also have the Euclid Open Backlog, where you can request new reports or changes to existing reports. We have the Euclid reporting webpage, which is part of the Euclid website, and this details a number of things about the reports. And for instance, here you can even download the report templates themselves, which we use as part of the default reports we make available in Euclid. For report builders only, so this is more directed to them, we have the OECD customization forum, which I mentioned. This is a really helpful forum for exchanging ideas and also for problem solving. And we also have a GitHub access to the common modules, which we'll discuss a bit later as well. So as I said at the start, one of the key objectives of this workshop is to put ourselves in your shoes and to think about what you need to know going forward to make use of the Euclid reporting functionality. So here is our attempt to do this. When should you take a look into Euclid's reporting capability? We would advise you to look into this if you're needing to extract data from Euclid datasets or dossiers on a relatively frequent basis. So for instance, you're wanting Euclid data in a human readable format in a standalone file such as an RTF, PDF, CSV, or HTML. Or you need to extract data into a format which you can then plug in or feed into another system. And for instance, you may want to generate a CSV or an XML file to do this. If you are focusing on a common set of fields each time you want to run an extraction, then you should definitely look into reporting capability, because if you have a common set of fields you're wishing to extract, once the report is built, from a couple of clicks of the button, you can constantly regenerate a report and get these common set of fields. If you're finding that, for instance, you have a core set of fields, but that the fields around it are varying that you need for whatever purpose, then we would still advise to maybe explore this option. You could output a core set of fields and at least work with them and include maybe the other varying fields by default and just remove them, for instance, as needed in the output. If, for instance, you're outputting a CSV file, this is very easy. You can quickly do some quick sorting and editing if needed. So in weighing up the pros and cons of exploring the reporting option, we would say that the first question you would need to ask yourself is how far are your needs covered by the existing suite of reports? As I mentioned, there's lots of reports available, maybe too many. And so for the existing reports, get to know these. ECHA and EFSA can help you with this. As I said on the report webpage, we have descriptions of at least the purposes of the various reports. And indeed, you can contact us and request and discuss modifying existing reports if needed. So if you see, for instance, there's a report containing a list of attachments and you think some vital piece of information to your processes is missing from this report, you can contact us and we can discuss what can be included. And indeed, we can update the report if we think there's a need there. As a disclaimer, we want to look as broadly as possible. So if we think that your request seems sensible and that seems to be relevant for many different stakeholders, there's a very good chance we'll go ahead with the request. If it seems something very specific to your organization, we may need to think about it a bit more. But obviously, this is a case-by-case basis. And when thinking about your needs, if you can't see in the existing suite of reports that your needs are being matched, or that there's a report that comes close to what you want, you may want to consider building a new report for your own internal implementation. Indeed, you could still request this from ECHA or EFSA for us to build a completely new report. Again, this would have to be taken on a case-by-case basis. We'd have to assess whether we think there's a broad need for such a report. But of course, you have the option to build the report yourselves. So if you've asked this question and you've decided to maybe build a report yourself, there's some potential areas to further assess. So we would say that is your current method of extracting or manually transferring data too resource intensive? For instance, if you are manually transferring information from a Euclid system to, for instance, a Word file, that from your perspective may be taking too many resources, and the reporting option could be ideal for you here. We would ask you to consider how large is the report you need. So for instance, if you need a report that extracts 10 Euclid fields across 10 endpoints in a CSV file, this is relatively quick to make once you have that, once you get the hang of the reporting capability. But a large assessment report is very much a different beast and requires much more planning and consideration beforehand. We would advise you to look at other tools that maybe do the job equally well or better. For instance, we have a Euclid data extractor, which extracts data in bulk. And we also have a generic printing functionality in Euclid as well, which gets data for you into an RTF or PDF output. The drawbacks of this is that the data extractor is quite a complex output. There's a number of CSV files generated, and although it's very powerful, does require quite a lot of investment to understand and to moreover curate after the extraction. And the printing functionality is a standardized output, so there's no customization possibilities available. And finally, we would recommend for you to assess whether there is a business continuity in place to maintain the reports. If you decided to create a new report, the maintenance cost should be taken into consideration. And by cost, I mean, for instance, man hours to maintain the report going forward. So those are some considerations that came to our mind when assessing whether you want to build your own report or not. So in terms of the reporting opportunities and capabilities, I've tried to list these here. These are mostly concerning creating your own report. So you can define the report's output. As I've mentioned, there's many outputs available. And you can define, if it's, for instance, an RTF or PDF output, the layout based on your organization's needs. For instance, if you need data in a tabular format in a table, if you need things in bullet points, if you need things divided by sections and chapters, this is all possible using the reporting capability because it's very customizable. You can program what you need, essentially. You can manage the report in your own local Euclid instances via the user interface. So we have a nice friendly user face for managing reports. You simply upload the report templates, you define a name for it, you define the output types, and once that's in, it's stored in the database and you're free to generate it and your users to generate it at will. Just a note that when you're migrating, for instance, between Euclid instances, if you have a set of reports uploaded into Euclid, they will be migrated to the next Euclid version if you're updating. You can reuse the common modules, which we'll come on to in a bit. These are very, very helpful. But please note, this means you abide to their governance, which we've outlined in the customization forum. Again, we'll explain a bit more about this later on. You can reuse existing report FTLs as well, which we make available on the Euclid website to help get you started. By default, this is a bit of a limitation. Only one report can be generated per dataset or dossier using the reporting functionality. However, you can do multiple generations if you set up a bash script, which we've made available via the reporting webpage, which means that you can generate, for instance, a report on 20 dossiers at the same time. Euclid Reporting is officially supported by ECHA and EFSA as well, so we can help in your report building. And finally, requests, and this is more for those who are thinking of maybe wanting modified who are wanting to modify existing reports. We do take requests on board for modifying existing reports and to tailoring these indeed to your needs. And one last thought to the report builders. This is good to take back if, for instance, you yourselves will not be building reports, but you think your organization may be interested in building them to extract data from Euclid, and you want to take it back to, for instance, a team where there may be a report builder. This is some good advice to give them. First of all, you don't need a programming background. The syntax can be learned, but of course it does help if you do have a programming background. This is a really big warning. Remember, you're trying to generate reports for specific business needs. You're not trying to become an expert. If you try to become an expert, you can spend a year getting familiar with the FreeMarker and DocBook programming languages, but you may never build a report. The idea is that if you have a need for a report, you get to know what you need to know, and you can succeed in your activity. Ensure you have clear specifications and an output in mind, or better, written down. Liaise internally with your business users to make sure that what you're writing matches what's needed by the business. This is very important. For instance, as an example here in ECHA, as just one report builder in the world, for the chemical safety reports, we have clear specifications on what's expected to be generated in the report, what data goes where, what conditions are in place for the output, things like this. And this is what the report is based on. And then the business side knows what will be expected in the report because they've got the specifications, and the report builders know what goes into the report. And of course, this also helps handover. So if you're getting a new report builder, they know what the CSR, for instance, is based on. We would always say start simple. So output one text field and build up. Don't start going for a full-blown report template when you start. Reuse the common modules as much as possible. Think of maintenance, as we've said, where you're storing these report templates, how you're managing them. And also, as a final thought, can you collaborate with other organizations? If you've got similar needs or other organizations, you may want to divide the work between you. And do you want to publish your report? That's one thing to consider. For instance, we like to publish reports on the Euclid website. Would that be an option for you? So going forward to the report templates themselves, I won't spend too long on this part, but just to give you, again, a bit of an idea about what's involved. So for the report builders, essentially, to get started, you need two things. You need a Euclid instance and you need a text editor. You need a Euclid instance so you can upload the reports you build and to test them and to make them available for the users. And you need a text editor to write your report templates. And there are hundreds, probably, of text editors available. Maybe not so many which are free, but there are some which are free as well. And this is a big remember for both the builders and the generators. We do have in the advanced settings when generating a report, the ability to do some level of filtering before the report generation. So for instance, if you're trying to, let's say, run the list of literature references, You can, if you want, just output the literature references in the toxicological section of Euclid and ignore all other sections if you wish. You could, for instance, output a report that only gives you fields which are flagged as confidential. You may want to filter and say that you only want fields that are flagged for a specific regulatory program like EU REACH or EU PPP. So these filtering options exist. They don't need to be built into the report. They exist at the UI level, the user interface level, and this has been available since 6.8 of Euclid in February this year. So what can be extracted with a report template? I put here FTL template. I'm sorry, I should have put report template to make it clearer, but I'm speaking about the same thing. So all structured information that is stored in the Euclid database plus some contextual endpoint information can be extracted to the report generator, which opens the door to a lot of possibilities. So for instance, if we look at the section tree here of Euclid, the dossier header information can be extracted. The root entity, as you see there at the top, this is a substance, can be extracted. Some key endpoint context can be extracted. For instance, the endpoint name here in REACH, we've named the composition section 1.2 composition, so this can be extracted. And the document names given by the users and their UIDs and document types can be extracted as well. So all sorts of things can be got if you want them. And if we go to the level of the document, so here is a composition document, again, all structured information can be extracted. You can get the UID of the document, the name, the type of composition here is a pick list field, for instance, the state and form. All these can be fetched. Also, any field lodged within a repeatable block, as with the attached description there. And also, just for information, these other outlier bits of data can also be extracted. So for instance, you can extract annotations from your Euclid dataset or dossier. You can extract attachment metadata, for instance, the name of the attachment, the size. You can also extract the modification history as well of a document if you wish. So at this point, I was going to go on to a bit more detail about the report templates themselves and the programming, but I thought better of it because it's better maybe to stay at this level. And later on, Adrian will give more a very good technical example of how the programming is actually working. So I'll leave it to him to try and explain that to you. But what I'll do is that after the event, when I distribute these slides, I will make what I originally planned here available so you can take a look if needed. So coming on to managing customization and the common modules. So as hopefully you've gathered by now, there's limitless customization available with the reporting. You can extract all the structured fields if you wish, any of the structured fields if you wish. You can customize the layout again as you wish. But the question we have and we've had from the very beginning, is it efficient to go in that direction, that everyone just creates their own report templates to match their own needs? And well, probably the answer is no. This will mean that there's a huge duplication of code and work out there. For instance, we could have a situation where we have different code bases for the same output. So for instance, there could be 5 literature references reports created, which pretty much are using the same code, but when there could be just one. Managing the FTLs in this case is not easy if there's so many. It unnecessarily increases the amount of support that's provided by ECHA and EFSA if there's loads of reports out there. So in all, this is just not an efficient direction to go. And we've been trying to address this for a couple of years now to support a common way in which people can enter the world of the reporting and reuse the code that we in ECHA and EFSA have been building. And indeed, there are many opportunities here, because when not only from the technical level of the programming, but when we look at the regulatory and business side, it's clear that we should have the same reports for different usages. And for instance, if we focus on the assessment reports, for instance, here I put an example of the CLH, the Classification, Labeling and Harmonization Report, and the CSR report. These are the same but different. They're the same in the sense that they contain pretty much the same information, but there's different layouts. There's a few outliers here and there. There's a few bits of data that is in one but not the other. But on the whole, they are extracting the same data. And thus, what we want to happen is use a common set of FTL report templates that feed into all these different generations. And for the list reports, so-called, these list reports which are extracting, for instance, a number of attachment information or literature references, again, there's opportunities here because these are focusing on a clear set of data points, and they'll be the same pretty much for everyone. And also there's an opportunity to provide a basic entry point here as well. So for instance, by creating a set of common modules, we help those who are more inexperienced to enter the world to reuse them so that they don't have to start from scratch. So yes, these are the sort of three opportunities we have in mind here. So as I've been mentioning now, we do have a number of common modules. These have been available since 2020. And to give you some figures, which I extracted, which I thought was quite interesting. Currently, if we look at the code base we have and all the reports we provide by default in Euclid, we've got nearly 60,000 lines of code. Nearly half, though, are in the common modules, which is a good sign. It shows that the common modules can take care of a good amount of your extraction needs. And indeed, all 53 reports that are currently available all share some level of common elements in Euclid. So, for instance, an EFSA report, for instance, a DocM report, will share common elements with the REACH CSR report, for instance. So it doesn't matter how different the reports are or the different usages, they will share in the background common points. And indeed, this is really important for us going forward, and we would encourage any new user of the reporting functionality in terms of as a report builder to explore this and to contribute to the project, because in a way the common modules is an evolving project and we want people to use it and contribute to it. So currently we have 25 common modules. I've listed them here, all of them. As you can see, they cover a number of different endpoints in Euclid, from classification and labeling to environmental hazards, to human health, to nanoforms, to basic product information, to basic studies and summaries information. There's a whole range here. And as you can see, they're mainly focusing on the assessment reports. All this information is feeding into the assessment reports, which we provide with Euclid. I did in 2020 make an initial mapping of these common modules to the chemical safety report, so you would know what you would get if you decided to use the common modules in the actual output. And this can be found from the URL there. And indeed, for these common modules, we've tried to name them by the type of endpoint which they relate to. And indeed, the largest modules are those which are extracting key hazard information. So essentially, the toxicological and the ecotoxicological common modules are by far the biggest, as well as secondary, but still big, are the environmental fate and phys-chem information as well. In managing the common modules, we look at this through the lens of the OECD. Euclid is also mandated to collaborate and work with the OECD. So we do take an OECD international perspective. And in this sense, what we've done, we've created a customization forum on the OECD's website, which supports and facilitates report builders. And this is where we've also housed the governance and instructions on how to use the common modules and how to access GitHub where they're currently stored. So indeed, this is a really good forum to sign up to. It's free, just as a few steps to create a user here. And we would really recommend you to register if you are thinking of building reports. So a quick word on how these are managed. Currently, they're in GitHub, and these are overseen by ECHA and monitored by ECHA. So you would create a local repository. You would change something which you think is relevant for everyone, or something maybe that's customized for your own specific report. You would make a pull request, and we would review it in ECHA and accept it, or request maybe for you to modify it. As I said, the guidance and governance of these is housed in the OCD customization forum, and you can find the web address there. In terms of just a quick word on as an outline of how these common modules are working, what you typically do is that you have a main report template. You call the common module. You can call this via your own name, your own variable name, and then you refer to a specific macro within that common module, which is extracting for you, for instance, a table of classification labeling or a table of acute toxicity oral endpoints. And it's as simple as that, really. The common modules are already defined. All you need to do is call them and you get the information. And because of this, you can actually build a huge assessment report very, very quickly if you just wish to extract a number of endpoints in the way it's currently given you. And so this is an example here in the screenshot of a table of studies on aquatic bioaccumulation. You can get this table by calling the relevant common module, calling the relevant macro within that common module for bioaccumulation, and you get this table automatically, assuming, of course, you have this endpoint in your dataset or dossier. The advantages are that, of course, this is really useful. You can quickly get the key data you want. And if you are looking to do some report building, these can be somewhat customized. You can add your own information if needed. We have a way to do this, or remove information if needed, and we have a way to do this. The limitation which we've discovered over the last couple of years is that these common modules need to be more customizable. Currently, the tabular layout you see here in this nice table of method, results, and remarks is quite fixed. You can't start rearranging the tabular layout. You can't start rearranging the data in a way which maybe suits your needs. And so an activity potentially for next year is for us to more separate out the data from the layout so you can get the data you want and choose the layout you want more easily. So just as a last word on the future directions and improvements. So for report generators and builders, we have an improvement to generate a report from a complex entity that is referenced inside the main entity. How wonderfully complex is that? So as an example here, what we mean, for instance, is if you're a pesticides user of Euclid and you want to generate a report from a component or an entity that is within your main mixture, you'll be able to do this directly from the user interface. So for instance, generate a report directly from the other representative product instead of the main mixture product which you're maintaining in Euclid. And we want to provide this possibility by April 2023. We're also in the process of verifying a really nice functionality to translate the hard-coded text in reports, so you can generate a report in a language other than English. And for report generators, we're planning a couple of improvements. We want to extend the advanced settings we want to extend using the advanced settings to a dossier as well as a dataset. Currently, this is only available from a dataset. And we also want to expand the output types to docx, which will vastly improve the curation of the extracted data after generating from Euclid. So you can easily manipulate the headers, for instance, in the table of contents or what have you. And we plan to do this in the first half of next year. For report builders only, we have a number of improvements coming up. We're planning to upgrade our common modules, as I mentioned, to split better the data and the format. We're planning to move what Adrian will present later, the traversal approach, more within the Euclid reporting engine, so it's easier for you to quickly iterate over the entire Euclid section tree and fetch the information you want. This will become clearer, hopefully, with Adrian's presentation. And a couple of things which we definitely want your feedback on is that we're thinking currently to move from DocBook, which is a programming language we use to generate the layout, the format of the report. So, for instance, generating the sections or table of contents of a report. And we're thinking of moving from that to HTML. which we would then use a separate software to convert that to a docx report or what have you. And for report builders, we would like your feedback on this. And we're also thinking of changing the repository where we're managing the common modules to Microsoft Azure. And we'll get onto that in a second. So as I said, for the translation, this is already available actually in the Euclid Report Manager. You can add what we call localization property files, where you can specify the translated text, and there's a way to then pull that text into the main report so you can output text in a different language. And we can provide more details outside of this workshop if needed. In terms of keeping .book or moving to HTML, HTML is obviously a much more well-known language compared to .book. .book is very niche. The style sheets in .book are very, very hard to manipulate, as myself and Adrian Thomas have discovered. HTML is exhaustively documented, and there's more help available. So it would mean essentially we're opening up the report templates even more to Euclid users if they can use HTML language. And indeed, we've already located certain open source softwares to convert to a docx format, for instance, from HTML if needed. So at the moment, as my voice is probably sounding, that we're thinking of moving to HTML, but we'd like your feedback on this if possible. So in terms of the potential plan, if it is to happen, this would start next year. To begin with, we would need to start modifying the reporting engine to provide this conversion from HTML to, for instance, docx. We would also need to permit the old reports in .book to still function and be maintained, so we don't accidentally break the old reports, which would be a disaster. We want to gradually move to HTML. This won't be a sort of forced move straight away, so we would start building all new reports using HTML instead of .book. And indeed, we would need to make sure we're maintaining these old reports as much as possible going forward. And in terms of the management of the common modules, Microsoft Azure is where we currently manage the report templates we use to deploy in a Euclid deliverable. And so it would make much more sense to manage these in Azure. The only issue is that you would need a Microsoft account to access it, and maybe that's a barrier. With GitHub, anyone can access this. So I'll move on to the EFSA's part now and their perspective, but just to let you know, we're going to come back to a Slido question on some of these in a while. So it'll give you a bit of time for thinking, which I hope you're still doing. So with that note, I'll pass over to Thomas. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. You can move to the next slide, please. So EFSA journey with report generator started as a result of transparency regulation and the use of IUCLID for plant protection products dossiers. We started collaborating with ECHA back in October 2020 on the report generator, and this fruitful collaboration continues until today. Our journey wouldn't be possible without also the ongoing feedback we receive from our stakeholders via different channels. For example, we have a technical group meetings, Hypercare, Pesticide Steering Network, IUCLID subgroup, and direct collaboration also with member states. We move to the next slide, please. In EFSA, like in ECHA, we have quite a unique position as we are wearing both hats of the report builders and also the report generators. We build reports for different stakeholders as industries, member states, commission, and more specifically, we support evaluators with regulatory obligations. For example, reports on confidentiality claims and notification of studies. We build reports for applicants, which are needed for submitting their applications. These are based on OECD harmonized templates. For example, the document D, L, M, and N. And we also build reports for users which allow them to check contents of dossiers. For example, when checking how many attachments are included or listing literature references. At the moment, we have 26 default reports, and then also on top of that, we have 5 uploaded ones. And as the output types, the 3 most common ones we use are PDFs, RTFs, and CSVs. The PDFs serving as a preview and to evaluate the submitted information, for example, for the confidentiality claims and notification of studies. RTFs types, these are used as a starting point for submitting application documents, for example, for the document D, L, M, and N. And also the CSVs, which are mainly for listing a list of records. If you want to extract the data, also provide you with some filtering and sorting options. So for example, we can name here the attachment report or a literature references report. Next slide, please. Let me now focus on the challenges we encountered on our journey and ways how we are overcoming them. So as mentioned, a free marker, not really common language. And as Mark mentioned, DocBook is not being well documented. Also, the community is quite small and support is limited. We are overcoming that by using the built-in function, which are written in Java. And I think we are providing here the link to the list of the functions. They perform faster and better. Also, a good starting point, let's say, is the common modules, which are we use them to learn initially, and also reuse the macro rather than starting from the scratch. Good example here is the common macro initiate relevance for PPP, which is used to customize the output of the common modules of the regulatory program, for example, the EU PPP. What we are still missing, though, is more flexibility in separating the layout from content, for example, the same data in table or list format, as Mark mentioned earlier. I think it's also important to mention free marker manual as a good source, and ECAS tutorial is another one. And last but not least, how to compensate the limited support is to join the OECD IUCLID customization forum. And again, if you haven't done that, I would encourage you to do so. Next slide, please. Another challenge is the absence of direct script execution. So being able to straight away see the effect of what you have written with the code. And also the limited built-in single report generation. So you need to upload the new version every time you want to visualize the changes. And also mentioning here is the time needed to for the multiple report generation. As you may know that you can only do one report at a time. To overcome that partially, I would say suggest to use the multiple report generator, which is based on the ByScript, which gives us the opportunity to initiate and generate multiple reports in one go, which are then stored in one folder. We use it often when we are testing the reports after the new releases. And the next slide, please. Another challenge we identified is the error handling. It was fairly bad in the past, and it has improved since. The error log has been initially available only in the classic interface, which I think, if I'm correct, it's being deprecated now. But yeah, it's now available in the cloud version. Nevertheless, there is still some room for improvement, as some error messages are still quite generic. Like, for example, the one on the presentation, error during transformation from DocBook to PDF, which we are seeing quite often. There are also a few pending challenges, which we would like to see being addressed. So being able to generate report for a specific data set within the dossier, for example, other representative products, as mentioned by Mark, or better handling of rich text field content, which should be available in the latest release. And we cannot wait to see that one. And also better performance of list reports, which Adrian will explain more about later this afternoon. And for me, thank you.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much, Thomas.